hearing, has to go through every case and figure out whether that conflict is bad enough that it needs to go out of the office or if there's a way to keep it in. The water was muddied by, there are other decisions that talk about governmental lawyers and whether or not a governmental lawyer should not have conflicts imputed to the whole office. That works great for a governmental agency. It does not work for public defender's office, and there's ethical opinions saying it doesn't apply to public defenders because we don't work for an agency, we work for each individual client.
Okay.
So I have to go through every single felony that's filed. I read every single felony. And I have one of the secretaries do a conflict check to go through all of the witnesses in this case and then see if we've represented any of them. Then I find out what they were represented on. If we're representing somebody on a driving without privileges misdemeanor and I've got them on a felony and they just happen to be there, probably I'm not going to conflict it unless I can't get a waiver. Because there's nothing I'm going to learn from the DWP case that's going to impact our ability to represent somebody on the felony.
So do we track numbers that way then?
Conflicts?
Yes. So like, do you track so I'm a Skittle sheet guy, okay?
Uh-huh.
I like Skittle sheets. I like to understand this amount of numbers to that amount of numbers because then it starts, patterns and data start making sense if you have enough data to start drawing conclusions and drawing out the data. So like when we have a conflict, we say, hey, this is conflicted because, and we can be very discreet. I don't want attorney-client privilege stuff. We have a conflict due to a co-defendant or a different case.
It's in the order.
I want, this or that, but I think, and I think that's where a lot of it, in a lot of these discussions.
We don't decide.
Yeah, but no, but.
So what I do is I do a motion in order.
To the judge.
If I determine there's a conflict, I do a motion in order. The motion says, we have a conflict and here's why. And then I'll explain one other subset, just so you understand what it is. It'll say, we have a conflict because of this, and then it has an order. And the judge can say no. If he wants to say, that's not really a conflict, you go ahead and keep the case, then we're obligated to do it.
Yeah.
But we can't just, on most cases, decide, it's just not a conflict.
No, but what I'm saying is like in that, I mean, the data going out of that, hey, we're asking for a motion to move it. Nope, the judge kicked it back. Or how many of those cases do we have?
That almost never happens.
But then, okay, if that's a rarity, but still keep track of it, because is it a certain judge that always kicks it back? What's the, how when we assign these conflict cases? And then the other thing too is understanding was the conflict cases go out, what's the complexity of that case? And what I mean, I know that's a very subjective thing to argue, but I mean, there's some basic things, and that's where as we've had these conversations for the last, 2 months,
Yeah.
there's a lot of these things that it's just the gaps in the data to be able to, how do we do this and plug it into.
We're just looking for some metrics that, depending on which way we go, how do we fund it, or how much do we have to fund?
And part of the problem with that is that I only have a thumbnail sketch from the outset. So I can give you a ballpark on this case doesn't look very complicated and it looks like this. I can't give you time because I haven't seen discovery or anything.
No, and that's and like I'm saying, what we're looking at, we're not looking like for a full deep dive. We're not supposed to use that word anymore. Apparently, it's the start of the new year, but I'm gonna use it anyway because I like it. But this is a case that, and whether we come up with some kind of just a tracking metrics, and that's what we're saying is hey, this looks like a case that it should be fairly easy. This is a case that looks like it's difficult because it gives us a column to sort it out in data. This is a case that looks fairly easy, but it's an issue because of co-defendants this way. It's an internal office conflict, or it's an external office, or it's however we kind of categorize a couple of those. How does this work? Because then the thing is that gives us a data set to start understanding where are we at. And those cases, it starts looking at too, okay, we know that the more difficult cases that we conflict out should take a little bit more time. Or do we have a more average caseload that we're sending out? Do they mirror pretty much what the public defender's office is? Because I don't know how to have a control group to determine what the conflicts are doing, and you can't manage them. We can't ask questions, and you got a bunch of guys up here that are saying, make it more efficient. Well,
Yeah, the problem is that when you get into somebody's individual determination about what needs to be done on the case, it's very hard to limit them.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'd had this same conversation with some of the other public defenders. You know, there are only 7 of us that are institutional.
Mhm.
So we talk every month. I think by and large, my understanding, and this is general, is that most people do a really good job and they're really fair. There are a couple that underbill and there are a couple that overbill, and it mostly
Yeah.
shakes out in the middle.
Well, and that's the thing that we need to build the data for. Because for us, again,
Do you have metrics that you guys track or that we could use to track?
Yeah.
That would say, all right, for your average misdemeanor, which, I don't know, what would be a common misdemeanor?
For DUI.
All right, how many hours do you spend on a common DUI case? 5, 10?
Somewhere between 3 and 20.
Right, but
But
so.
no, that's normal.
No, and that's
because-
fine, so you say somewhere between 3 and 20, so we use an average for budgeting purposes of 13. Okay, so now we can say we have 100 DUI cases a year at 13 hours each at $85. Now we kind of have an
Yeah, I
idea
can
for-
run those numbers and get you all the cases that were conflicted over the past year.
see,
It's easy.
and so that's some of the numbers. That's what we're starting to look at, because as we start looking how to we don't have any of that, and so that's been half the problem with this whole issue for the last forever. Is the Board of County Commissioners is supposed to be the ones that are overseeing the conflict contracts. We don't have. We're trying to manage something that we don't have, and to tell you the truth, in the past, the use of legalese or the intimidation factor of you're going to get in trouble with the PDC or whatever, I don't really care. They want to take away my birthday, go right ahead. But the whole thing is we've got to understand how is this working. I need a control group from this. This also helps. There's some other things that are starting to come down in the legislature dealing with districts. That's something that hit the table today.
Yeah.
So, but we've got to start understanding numbers. We've got to start understanding where are we at in our region, not a state, because I can't pull data down that affects Bannock County. I don't know what that's going to cost. I don't know how to look at this. So what we've got to do is, again, I need you guys to start tracking some numbers internal. I know you're 3 to 20, but we can start looking at that. You can throw outliers out, and you can start to establish a trend curve. I mean, it won't be precise, but it would start getting you into a better picture of understanding of, hey, all the crazy DUIs that we have, and they're nutty, we average 17 hours. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's 22 hours. I don't care what it is. It's just, that's the number then that as we start looking at these other models, because we can start looking at cases, we start looking at what's going on with our conflicts, we start looking at if we're going to have cost sharing approaches, because the legislature's talking about us paying for things and other stuff. Well, I'm not going to do something if I know that some other county has got a whole bunch more stuff that's going to cost us the money.
And
Does
if
that
we
make
do-
sense?
If we do a regional public defender, that's another one of those things that the other counties are going to want to know, how do we budget for this?
And that just hit that did just hit as an RS, and they're putting a bunch of money and a bunch of other things, and it's going to be this whole debacle if we can't sit there and have very precise answers. And the worst thing, and again, just for us, for me as just somebody who has to pay the bills, it's horrible to try and figure out what's the money involved in this, because if we bolo it and we miss it, then we have to try and scrape out and figure out where it's coming from. And we don't know how, if we go and move these guys to an hourly contract and bring some guys internal, we got to have something to measure them against. We got to have something to.
Well, I'll just tell you that it's come to our attention that supposedly the way that we're doing it with the monthly flat rate is not right. And so that's come to our attention. So we want to do what's right. And so we're trying to figure out, okay, where do we do this? Then the other part is, we as a commission would like to bring some of this internal. And I told them the other day, my thoughts are, if we had 2 attorneys and 3 staff members, then how many can we alleviate of those that we have contracts with now? And so we're trying to figure all this out, and is our methods that we've been using, are they the right methods? That's what I'm asking you for, is what is our methods, and can it be adjusted? Are we overcompensating too many people on contract? what do we need to bring in-house, and where do we need to go?
Yeah, we shouldn't be doing contracts. It's been several years that's been a bad idea. But everyone else has kind of gone to hourly, or they're just talking about creating separate offices. There are agencies that have those numbers done. There are some cities and some counties that have a conflict office. I'm from Tucson. Pima County has a public defender's office, and then there's a Tucson public defender's office, and then there's also a juvenile defenders of Pima County, and they operate like conflict offices. So that's one of the ways you can handle it, but part of the problem is you never know exactly how many conflicts you're going to get in a given year. We've had cases where we ended up having 10 co-defendants back in the days when labs were really common. We'd have 10 co-defendants in one time, and our office could only take one of them. At that time, there were only 7 attorneys in my office, so it wasn't that big a deal. The conflict numbers have never really changed much. They don't go up a great deal unless there's some weird situation like that where you have multiple co-defendants.
So do you have a number of, on average, every year we conflict 300 cases?
I can get it. I can sure get that.
Because
we track that every year. We know exactly how many we send out.
And the other thing too is part of the assignment, and this is the problem with the contracts or just the employee or all this other stuff, is the assignment of cases and difficulty rating and all that other stuff. Well, the conflict attorneys are just convinced that you guys are just taking the most difficult cases that are there and you're kicking them out to them.
We take the most difficult cases.
Well, I know that. I know that, but I don't have any way to say no. That's not correct, because I can't show, like, in a curve pattern. You're going to have a displacement. You shouldn't have a straight line. You should have a displacement pattern.
And if they want to have a conversation about any of those, I'll come and explain to them, but they already know which cases. They know what's on the order. And sometimes we do have people that are really difficult, and they fire my office and say, I don't want anybody from there, and then it's a matter of the judge let them out and appointed somebody else, and I didn't have anything to do with it.
Well, and then the other thing too is the assignment portion as well, because they kind of do a round robin and that, and there needs to be that's the next discussion, is how we assign stuff. They have felonies, they have misdemeanors, they have this, they have whatever. Who goes what? How do we do that? But again, there's no rhyme or reason. It appears right now, but if we have some data showing that, hey, this is how we've been doing it for the last, so if we start this now where, hey, let's start getting some tracking metrics of, hey, I got a case I'm conflicting out today. It's a DUI misdemeanor. The conflict is just it's not because that there was an additional charge or anything like that. It didn't have anything to do with it. This is a first-time offendee or whatever, some data points that were tracking points. Because then what happens is that case goes through, we can track and see hours and everything else. So then by the end of the year, if we've done that with all of our cases, or a reasonable amount of time for measurement, hey, we have a disbursement of case complexity. It wasn't just a first timer. It wasn't just your frequent flyer. It wasn't just this. This is a random. We can start talking to that specifically, because right now there's no way to tell the judges, guys, why are you doing it this way? Well, this is the way we do it. Well, okay, we can understand how that's going, but we don't understand where the cases came to begin with, and we don't understand right now how they end. And so we need to track those cases through, because then we can start pulling through that data. Hey, we are not getting this section of cases for some odd reasons not going. All the hard cases are staying in the public defender's office, guys. Right. There's or the felony level cases. You're the only capital certified. There's 2 of them. So those cases are hard. They're not going anywhere. Well, I don't know the severity of other capital type. I mean, if there's other, I don't know. I wouldn't say capital type, but complex. Assaults, deaths, murders, rapes, that kind of stuff.
The Public Defense Commission does not differentiate between any felony.
Well,
so they treat a simple possession exactly the same way as a murder one that's not death penalty.
So that's the problem, is where they might not treat it the same, we're not going to. We've got to have some data to understand that, because that's what I'm saying is right now we're flying blind here, and this is the most frustrating thing. The only way you can ever try to help or make changes or adjust is you got to know where you're going, so you're not just steering things in the dark. And so that's what we need to have happen, is we got to start coming up with some criteria of just some simple tracking metrics. It doesn't have to be anything complex. I don't want a novel written. But there's got to be some measurable stuff that we can start saying, courts, we're not doing this right. Or PDC, you need to track the type of felonies. We understand you don't want to.
We're making that argument already, because there's, when they do our case counts, you can only have, so one death penalty case counts as 110 cases, right? So theoretically, Scott Andrews done for the year, because he has 2 right now. One is potential and one is actual.
Yeah.
So for right now, he's done. I'm already 50 cases over for the year, and that's how it's going to be for a while. So they're not differentiating, and we think they need to. A simple possession case, between 5 and 10 hours on an easy possession case, not a big deal.
See, and so that's why I say
that same possession, if it has a motion to suppress in it, if it has motions in limine that need to happen, if that person has a prior conviction you're trying to exclude, all that's going to add time. So I don't know, and I think these are some of the ideas we need to bounce around, are perhaps getting somebody out of the statistics department at ISU and borrowing them and helping us come up with something.
it's pretty funny that you should say that. Braden, I don't know if you had to take quantitative and qualitative methods. I had to take qualitative and quantitative methods and statistics multiple times. And we have some people that can help us with that. But that's what I'm saying, is we got to have those data points to give them.
Yeah, and we can do that. But the other thing is, and this is just something I've been bouncing around, Scott and I talked about it, is maybe at some point if you're going to decide on the billing, because you got to remember, I've never billed anybody.
Yeah.
That's just, this is why I have this job, because I want to do the work.
Yeah.
It has also not been, prior to me, really required that anybody keep time.
Yeah.
Because public defenders, by and large, since they're not billing on that, we take notes, but we don't keep our time because we're not billing on the minute.
So you don't have any kind of tracking?
We do on some cases, and on other cases, it's more about notes than it is about time. But with this new system that everybody will be on at the end of the month, time's going to be required on that. I'm adding that in.
That's what I was going to bring up. I'm assuming you guys never had to keep track of time on the cases. So if you're going to try to present any metrics right now, you wouldn't be able to do that. Because, and that's never been done in the past. That's typical with public defender offices, right?
Well, and the Boise State study, to my mind, just says that public defenders do their work a lot more efficiently than private counsel, and they pad.
Well,
because the amount of hours they were saying that they did for a simple possession case was stupid.
Yeah.
So to my mind.
Well, and again, there's also, there's probably going to be some discussions once we start figuring out this model. We'll probably go down the hall with Herzog and the prosecutors and kind of start understanding, because then there's some justification of staffing levels and other people that we're hiring. I mean, the whole thing it comes back to is when we do this, a lot of times what we're asking or looking for is we're shooting in the dark because we don't have...
There's no data points.
There's no data points.
Yeah.
And this is one of the only offices, and, well, not
But
offices.
if we go hourly, they will have to submit invoices.
Yeah.
They will, and I think you guys should hire a special master at some point, and it should be part of their contracts that this is, I'm just spitballing, Brian, this is your ballywick, not mine. I was just thinking about this the other night, and I talked to Scott about it. You should hire a special master who is a criminal defense lawyer who just reviews billings.
Well, and so, but that's, again, that's what we're looking at. So, but, we need to go through that, because, again, the whole section of the criminal justice arm, the public defense, the prosecution, the courts themselves, everything that we're asked to pay for, things are here, there's not data in it. Everything else in the county, we have measurable things that we can look at. We have things that we can do, even if it's qualitative data. Was it good service or bad service? How many negative phone calls did we get this month? We have those kind of data points there. Some of them aren't a lot, but there's still some data points you can use. Like I say, in this office, especially public defense, if you want to talk about, like, the only time we ever hear anything about public defense is when we're getting sued for $958 billion or whatever the guy wants.
985.
985 million. That's what we're talking about. Is
Every 2 days.
those are the things. So we need to create some metrics. How do we start looking at this in a realistic thing? Because then we do go fight with PDC about, hey, your caseloads, how you're doing this, okay, this is fine, but you need to differentiate a simple possession case as opposed to a rape charge or a aggravated assault or a premeditated something.
So, some of our numbers aren't going to be any good anyway.
That's fine.
Starting from now, they will be.
That's fine.
And here's why. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing on the caseloads now. So I told you previously that our conflict numbers were a little skewed because Bannock County had not done what a lot of other districts have done and connected misdemeanors with an attendant felony.
Right.
They've made them two separate
Yes.
files. Then not anymore.
Yeah.
If one person has both charges, they're both going in the same charging document, so we're handling both. Same will be true for conflict counsel now. There won't be a misdemeanor attorney appointed and a felony, or that attorney's getting a misdemeanor case and a felony case, because we count cases, not counts.
Yeah.
There's no place where you count the number of charges that we handle. We count cases. So now, instead of a DUI and a possession of meth, you'll have a DUI and a possession of meth.
Yeah.
It'll be one file.
Yeah. See, and so that's what I'm saying. It's like, but in that DUI and possession of meth is probably going to be a little bit different than DUI or
It will,
or
because
yeah.
honestly, the DUI will get a lot less attention because people will be focused on the felony, and most of the decisions will be made on the felony, and the misdemeanor will be an afterthought.
See, and so that's what I say is some of these numbers. That's what we need to look for. Okay, so those are the numbers. Those are kind of the measurable. Something we've got it. So that's why I say we need to have some thinking about it here in the next little bit.
Yeah.
Well, and the other part about that is we're not accusing anybody of not doing their job.
Oh, I
No.
know.
But the conflicts haven't had to even talk to anybody or answer to anybody about anything that they've done. And now we're realizing our position, and we want to get control of it. And we want them to come and talk to us, just like you come and report to us on a regular basis. We want them to come and have conversations with us. We want to know where the money's going. Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Is the process the right process? We're just starting.
Question. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
One of the things we may need to consider at some point is if we can't get people that are going to do a good job, is to have the judges start putting people on the panel and just rotating them.
Yeah.
That leads into my question.
But the problem with that is some of those attorneys you will have to pay more because they don't know what they're doing on these cases.
Yeah.
How do you measure customer satisfaction or customer service in your world, or do you even do that? Because I know as an official, I'm looking at it as a referee, you never really can get a good audit survey, but.
No, and it's not super easy this way either, because you got to remember almost everyone that goes to court is unhappy.
Right.
To some degree. Imagine if every game you did ended up in a tie.
Right. Like soccer.
Thanks for that. Sometimes that's the right result.
Sorry,
Dave. Every time there's a problem, if there is a problem, if somebody's having issues with somebody, I get involved and I go talk to them.
Right.
And if I can handle it in-house, I do. Some cases, I'm trying some misdemeanors in the next couple of weeks just because that's what it took to calm some people down. And I don't mind doing it. I'm not too big for my britches there. If we can get somebody taken care of. And the other thing that you need to realize is that in my world, mental health covers their mental health problems in about 80% of the people I see.
Yep.
So I deal with a lot of antisocials, a lot of borderlines, and folks that it doesn't matter what we do, they're not going to be happy, and they're victims of the entire system.
Yeah.
So I'm reviewing files to make sure people are doing what they're doing. I'm watching Zoom hearings because my concern is not so much that the defendant is happy as that my attorneys are doing a professional job. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and they're making sure that constitutional rights are protected.
Yeah.
If I'm watching one of my attorneys make an argument and his client hates him for doing it, I don't care as long as he's doing what he needs to do on that case.
Right, right.
And clients are pissed at us all the time, and sometimes
That's just
it's part of the, there are some coaches you can never make happy.
Right, right.
They can be winning 50-6,
Yeah,
and you're favoring the other team.
yeah. I guess my question, I asked the wrong question as you were answering. I think my question is, I know the bar probably has some level of standard level of care.
Yeah, ineffective assistance of counsel is the standard for an ineffective. If a post-conviction is done on an attorney saying, hey, they screwed up my case, and because of that, this bad thing happened, and then Brian usually defends those cases and saying, look, the attorney did what they needed to do under the standards. We don't have very many of those granted ever. I've had 2 granted in 27 years. One, the judge was wrong. I did do exactly what was in there, and the judge made a mistake, so he granted the post. The other, that we got the letter requesting a Rule 35 the day that it was due, and it didn't get filed on that day. So I filed a post saying, it's my fault, I didn't file it on the right day. Those are the only ones I've had granted in 27 years.
Well, in the last month, we've had 2 judges have concerns about 2 of our conflict attorneys. And when that comes back to us, that's not good.
That's what I was going to bring up with Dave's position in his office. It's so public, right? That if there's an issue, it's not something that is going to be missed. There's multiple people watching. There's other attorneys. There's the public. There's judges. So I know Dave does his internal stuff, right, to make sure they're handling their case under your office standards. But if there's other issues coming out of that, we're going to know about it. Because not only because it's public, but also post-conviction reliefs, we get them, review everything and see what there are. So it's not like they're going to be able to hide it very long if they're having issues.
Yeah.
There's
Actually, my people are directed that if they made a mistake, they sign an affidavit saying it was my mistake. Because part of the reason that attorneys have such high rates of depression and alcoholism and a lot of other things is this constant belief that you can never make a mistake, and that's not human. So sometimes people need to be supported in the idea that if you made a mistake, it is never the mistake that causes people problems. I don't understand why they learn this. It's the cover-up.
Yeah.
If you say I screwed up, it's going to get handled. And if your client missed a rule, if you missed a Rule 35 like I did, let them have the Rule 35. Say I didn't file it. It gets filed. They had the Rule 35. His Rule 35 was denied. There was no way he was ever going to get it granted. But he had a right to have that hearing, so we made sure he got it.
Well, and so again, it comes back to a lot of that stuff. That's what we're starting to talk about. Is this is a realm that, especially where we're going down with what the state's talking about doing and a lot of this other stuff, we just got to start building data.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing and it might not be our data pulling apart in the next year or so, but it might be something that we start tracking for the next while, and somebody down the road uses our data to determine something, and that's how we make it better.
Carrie can run every case for you by attorney, tell you how many were tried, how many were settled by plea.
Yep.
And we talked to him 2
That's
days ago.
That's easy to get through.
Yeah, and that's
Tyler.
But it's some of that internal stuff of that's a quantitative analysis. Now we're asking for the qualitative analysis. And so to build the qualitative analysis a lot of times is not built, it is built on opinion, it is built on observation, it is built upon, you don't get that qualitative analysis from just this and this. There has to be some of it where does appear to be a complex case. We can check the numbers, which is the quantitative. The qualitative, though, we're talking about this is what the problem is, this is how this goes, and so we really got to have both of those. And that's and in the statistics model, that's what they're going to look at is, do you have a model based on sheer qualitative and sheer quantitative, or are you building a model that's representative to both of them? Because then when we start talking about funding mechanisms and other things that way and how that works, people don't understand that there are cases that, why does that DUI case take 25 hours? Well, there's X, Y, Z around it, and anybody who's in the practice of law would know that, but us layman people won't know that.
Well, and the other thing, some of the X factors that you'll never figure out are, like, do you have a client that's willing to resolve it, or do you have a client that will not agree to anything ever?
Well, but
That's a lot of work.
That's the
And you can't tell that from a file.
Well, exactly, and that's the qualitative piece. Those are the things we've got to understand. Because I am really nervous about this, because we're going to have an additional $900,000 in property tax at the most, and we're already about $350,000, and we're running out real fast, and I don't know how to pay for this, and so we've got to be fairly accurate in our budget this year.
Along that line, HR is looking at pay scales and stuff. I mean, we could be $600,000 gone of next year's budget just by going through pay scales.
I know.
So all this other stuff, we're just.
Well, and so that goes too into departments, new hires, new stuff. And I'll tell you, the departments that have numbers and data and they can back up their argument, they're the ones that win the case. I mean, they're the ones that win it. And so this is why I'm saying, you guys have got to start coming up with, let's work on some numbers. Let's figure out some, what can we do in some of this stuff to start.
We'll have you work with Braden. Braden will get a hold of you for numbers and stuff and talk to you.
That's fine.
Yeah.
We're gonna go through him and with our conflicts, they're gonna start going through Braden and.
Well, and some of these conversations,
contact.
Braden and I can hold privately, and
Yeah.
we can have some of these conversations about some of the issues that don't need to be aired.
Yes.
In this, and that's a matter of he and I sitting down and building a relationship so that we both feel comfortable saying whatever we need to say.
Well,
And I've had a great experience with him thus far.
and so
And I trust Brian.
Yes, don't screw it up.
Well, one of my favorite professors, Mark Anderson, I used to sit in the faculty lounge with him periodically. And he one time told me, he said, "Remember, Dave, when you get out and start in the world, your reputation is worth $1 million. It can, however, only go down. It never goes back up. But anytime, if you are tempted to cut a corner, that will be remembered by someone."
Well, and like I said, it's one of those things that we just have got to start understanding this.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be a lot of complex questions this next year, and I have nothing to base it on other than a gut feeling, and I don't like doing that.
Well, we can certainly tell how many cases there are.
Yes.
That's easy, and we can take an average over the past few years and tell you exactly how many cases get done. I will not be able to, in any timely fashion, be able to tell you how many of those cases would have been joined in the past.
And we understand that. And that's the other part, too, of kind of measuring what the courts are saying, because they're saying, oh, this, and then, we're looking at in the next 18 months, another magistrate judge, we're looking at possibly another district judge. And so
the district judge, I can see. I think my opinion is that the magistrate may not happen because we're going to see a drop in the misdemeanor caseload, probably about 15 to 20% because of the attachments to felony cases.
And that's what I'm saying is so those are the things, because they're going to ask us when they start putting that in, and we're going to have to sit. One of us is going to go sit in Boise when they are doing appropriations, the magistrate, and they're in JFAC, and they're going to sit there and they're going to be like, why do you not think that you need to pay for another district judge?
Kerry was saying there could be 2 judges retire from here the next
Yeah, they're going to be fairly quick.
6 to 8 months.
Yep. That they're getting ready to reconvene the panel.
Well, I know one.
Yeah. So that's the whole thing
One
too.
is here, once in.
Yeah, down south. But that's the whole thing that we're looking at is all of these things.
Lots of changes.
They're all tied together, and there's probably gonna be a conversation starting in Herzog's office too to start looking at data to help us understand that, because I don't know how else that we're gonna do some of this stuff.
There's no one on the bench here that was. Murray is the only one that was on the bench when I started.
Wow.
Are
you that
talking
old?
about leaving?
I am.
Jeff, any?
No, we're good. Thank
I don't
you,
know
Dave.
if you want to start tracking, you wouldn't be able to start until after now. You wouldn't have any numbers to go off, right?
Yeah.
So there was any. if
Not
there was any-
not on time and stuff
No,
like
we'll
that.
start
That would
back
have to
on-
be prospective,
Right.
but
That'd be like-
retrospectively, I can get you the number of cases and averages over
Yeah.
the past 5 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Let's start with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll break them out to felonies, juvenile misdemeanors, they'll be broken out that way.
That's data I get
Because
from
you
you,
probably
not
want
Carrie.
to give them at least 6 months of tracking.
No, yeah, we want to start. We want to
So
start
you
like
don't wanna-
moving forward. We're looking at moving forward
Yeah,
stuff, and we're
okay.
talking about, a lot of this. When I make my Skittle sheets in the Army, when I start doing things like this, it's, hey, I have an Excel sheet that has like 6 questions on it, and every day that was just I have one item that I add to that. Well, all of a sudden, after I've done it for 8 months or whoever is assigned to do it, now we've got this data that is like, huh?
Well, just as an aside, and I don't want to take up all your time because I know you have a lot of things to do, but you remember, when the office started with 5 and then we went up to 7, 6 months after we started, and we stayed at 7 for 10 years. And there was never any quantitative study doing, and it wasn't until the Public Defense Commission came in, and at that time, like now, the county was paying for 9, I added 2 out of grant funds. And then they said we needed 20, which I never went up to because we didn't, those were their numbers, not mine, and I was better suited to make that determination. But you gotta remember, almost all of my budget, unlike road and bridge and things like that, almost all of my budget is people.
Yeah.
So the only way I can tell you what it takes to run my office is give you, this is the number of cases that we've handled, this is the standard that's been set, we can't do more than this, although some of us do. And this is how many people it takes to run this office. Because our B budget is really small compared to a lot of other places. Our budget is almost all people.
Well, and that's where I say, is that standard legitimate?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes, our standard, believe it or not, is still very high for most places. The ABA standard is 150 felonies a year.
Okay.
But I think it washes out because they have me count probation violations as new files, and it's not warranted. They don't take that much time. A PV, a complicated PV, this is a good example because cases get reopened. PVs, a non-complicated one takes an hour.
what is a PV?
Probation violation.
Probation violation.
Somebody who's on probation, they come back in front of the judge because they screwed up. Taking care of that between the hearing and the sentencing, an hour. If it's really complicated, 4. Shouldn't take more than that. And we need to be real careful about people billing for resets. Because if they're resetting hearings because they're not ready,
Well,
that's,
so that's what we're talking. That's so you see what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
About these are questions that we need to put together that are just not necessarily going to be for your office, but it's got to be something for them individually
well, I
too.
keep track of resets, and I'm the one that's pissed off about them, even though there's no monetary draw.
Right.
Well, there is. It's a sunk cost, but there's still. It's a.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a whole different argument.
You're gonna want to
Yeah.
make sure people are ready.
But what I'm saying is
Yeah.
those are the things that is you guys. That's why we keep in mind that whatever you're putting on there is what they're going to be.
I got you.
All right.
All right.
Well,
Not my first rodeo. Just so you know, I had hair when I started.
You still do. You just gotta look
Yeah, it's
upside
just
down.
gravity pulled it out the bottom.
Huh, must be a trade of the business.
Just been lazy.